Thank you all for joining us today for this discussion on poultry. So, titled Why UK Native Poultry Matters, Conservation Crisis and the Future. So today I'm joined by a panel of experts in the field to discuss all things poultry and waterfowl related. Just an introduction about myself to start off with. So I'm Tom Blunt, the Senior Conservation Advisor at the Rare Breed Survival Trust. So obviously a charity dedicated to the conservation of our rare and native breeds of livestock, which obviously includes the poultry that we're going to be discussing today. I'll talk more about the specific role of RBST within the poultry field in a second, but if we could introduce the panel first.
I'm Ben Henderson. I am the chairman of the Scots Dumpy Club, one of two on the domesticated breeds in Scotland. I have been the chairman since last year when I was elected at the AGM. I have been deeply involved in exhibiting the breed, and I keep Shetland ducks as well.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Kai Morgan, founder and director of Find My Poultry, the first dedicated poultry platform in the UK and Ireland. I'm also run a small holding in Brecon, breeding Brecon buff geese, Shetland ponies, and Black Welsh Mountain sheep, as well as a variety of other chickens, ducks, and other breeds.
Good morning. I'm an avian vet, and I've been involved with turkeys, heritage type turkeys, the ones that actually can breed, as opposed to the commercial ones which are too wide legged to do so. For all my life, and involved in the start of the Turkey Club itself, which was 2000, and then I took over as secretary.
My name's Tom Davis. I'm the farm manager at Mudchute Park and Farm, and keep a variety of waterfowl and poultry, and also I'm a member of the council for the British Waterfowl Association and also the Poultry Club.
Thank you all. So yeah, like I said, I'll just start by introducing the role of RBST when it comes to poultry conservation. So as we do with all the breeds and species we deal with, ultimately we try and work out a way in which we can promote the breeds, their conservation, and obviously that's trying to work with the breeders and keepers. So ultimately the first protocol is our Watchlist. So produced on an annual basis. And within this, we obviously highlight the priority nature of some of these breeds. And unfortunately, in recent years, all of the poultry that we recognise and record, so it's covering chickens, turkeys, ducks, and geese, all of them are listed as priority breeds. And we'll expand on the reasons in a second as we discussed today, but some of that is obviously based around the impact that avian influenza has had in terms of the number of animals around, number of breeders, etc. Obviously, there was an interruption and disturbance from the COVID pandemic, and also as well the challenges faced in terms of gathering the breed data for the individual breeds. They're slightly different in compared to the other species that we deal with in terms of gathering data, where they're sort of formally registered with a breed society, individually identified, etc. When we're looking at like cattle and sheep as one example, and people get pedigree certification, etc. with their individual animals, whereas in most cases for the poultry side of things, it's very different in terms of how they're recorded and things. And this is where we'll try to work with the various organizations and breed clubs to try and monitor the numbers and try and gather that information so that more informed decisions can be made going forward. And ultimately as well, trying to promote the uses of these breeds, both from the utility side of things in terms of the production of whether that's produce in sort of either eggs or in some cases there is some interest I get from a meat side of things, and perhaps we will discuss that a bit later on as well. But if we get into the sort of main part of today's talk, so like I said, there's a few elements we will probably or will discuss in terms of the disruption of COVID, avian influenza, perhaps the keepers themselves, and sort of how that looks as a bigger picture, and the challenges we do face with data. But I'm going to put a question out to all of you to start off with, and it's just trying to ascertain from where you're sort of standing, how you think the poultry industry and the sector we operate in, and the sort of conservation of the breeds has perhaps changed over the last few years. Perhaps we could start to look at the sort of pre-pandemic and what the picture looked like, and obviously how things have been looking since then. Like I said, both of the COVID disruption and we seem to around the same time with sort of avian influenza, sort of double impact, wasn't it really? If we could start off with that. Ben, I don't know if you want to start from your perspective, sort of how things have changed.
Quite dramatically, really. I mean, even if you ignore the COVID and avian influenza stoppages, the cost of keeping poultry, the housing orders that came with that as well, and it's generally become increasingly difficult to maintain interest. The 2019 at the Great British National Poultry Show, the Scots Dumpy Club had one of its largest ever in recent years, showing for breeders and exhibitors. And then since then, with all the shows being cancelled, well, mostly cancelled, and the disruption, not only has the club's numbers dropped, as in members, but the breed itself has really suffered in keeping. So added with now, obviously, there's a sort of much larger government involvement in the registration and the sort of bureaucratic side of policy, it's become very, very difficult and expensive to keep them.
Yes. Victoria, if we come to you next, if that's okay.
Yes, of course, it's been a huge upheaval, both with COVID and probably even more so with avian influenza, because both of which have been very strongly concerned with people going out of the complete crowd, if you like, and also some of the birds. Now, some people have been very unfortunate and have had to have their birds culled because they were being close to a commercial poultry industry type places, and that makes it very difficult for backyard people who on the whole have not been the cause of avian influenza chasing around the country. So with the regulations to keep everybody at home and the birds under regulations like housed, that's made life very difficult. The only good thing that I can see out of the avian influenza regulations is the use of netting. And I think that is absolutely wonderful. And I have several local flocks of extremely angry crows and jackdaws and magpies who can no longer get in to eat the eggs and the food and be a nuisance.
No, yeah, I think, from speaking to some people, there have been some positives from those sort of what's seen as the biosecurity measures, but I appreciate there is obviously sometimes a practicality issue and also a cost associated with it, particularly if you've got existing infrastructure, isn't it? It's how that can be adapted. And certainly there's obviously challenges depending on the type of birds you're keeping as well. From your side, obviously the turkeys are much larger than some of the poultry breeds we're discussing, and obviously Tom with the waterfowl side of things. That is obviously very difficult, isn't it, to be able to adhere to some of the guidelines and the practical issues that are within that. Tom, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the main thing when the housing order came in is the massive impact it has on both domestic and ducks and geese and their welfare. You cannot shut in ducks and geese in a stable or a barn for an extended period of time without access to fresh, clean bathing water, without it impacting their physical health in a detrimental way. So one of the things that we've done here is we've sort of built netted pens. Like Victoria said, the netting is a dream. We've netted pens on the end of the sheds that we house our waterfowl in, which now also double up as breeding pens for the pure breeds. So we have metal pig wallow troughs in there that are cleaned out daily, and we have wood chip on the floor, which is changed regularly. So that is what we've done to combat that. So even when there is a full housing ban in action and enforced across the UK, our waterfowl can still get out, yes, into a restricted space, but it's still big enough for what they require. But also, as well, more importantly, they have the access to that clean bathing water to dunk their heads and keep their eyes, ears and noses clean, which is incredibly important.
So yeah, so obviously it's sort of added another element to the design of any new housing and things that you put in, isn't it? I suppose although there might not be any sort of housing requirements at the time when you're putting it in place, you're always thinking about the what ifs and preparing, aren't you? So that you're not having to adapt once they come in, which is unfortunately the situation we're in, but having to adapt at the time of installing the infrastructure and preparing for having to house it, etc., and things. And Kai, have you got anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, for me, it would just be access and connections. I was 12, going into COVID. I just started building up exhibition stock, realizing the impact on what I was breeding was having down the line, on understanding what I was breeding. And so started going to these shows, going to markets, talking to people, building connections and establishing myself with these people and, creating a name. And that all disappeared. I had no way of meeting new people. There's no standard way of finding new birds, new bloodlines, new information. It's a really sort of key area. Shows are a huge, huge place for people to be able to meet and gain an understanding, from people involved to people who have no idea or involvement at all.
Yes, yeah, and I think there's a few elements to it, isn't it? In terms of, we talk about the breeders and things, as you said, when you're trying to encourage new people to come into it, they're essentially the marketplace, aren't they? They're both from that networking side of things, both shows and sales, in terms of getting people to, even obviously there's people that might not have any history or background of poultry, but they walk around these events and see a pen of birds, and that's their sort of first interest. Obviously historically, I see poultry as being one of the, perhaps an introductory breed to livestock going forward, because obviously some people, the practicalities of keeping larger animals is quite difficult in terms of the land required, whereas certainly growing up I saw poultry as the almost like a stepping stone to getting that bug into livestock, really, as well, because it was generally seen as being more accessible, isn't it, in terms of of keeping birds and things. So yeah, certainly that's something I've seen from the outside with those challenges, and obviously there's the knock-on implications of that, isn't it? If new breeders aren't coming in, for those of you that have involved directly with breeds, obviously we talk about numbers and breeders and things, but presumably we've seen some people have completely sort of restructured their breeding plans, and numbers have drastically reduced as a direct consequence of the likes of these shows and sales not happening, haven't we? So it's really is a difficult situation, and like we said, over time we do start to lose those contacts, and that's something we're conscious of trying to get people back involved in terms of it, and trying to look at what opportunities there are to bring new breeders in, as well as obviously trying to encourage those that perhaps have moved away from breeding and things from that side of it. Has anyone got any further things to add on that, in terms of how things have changed and over those?
I've noticed I don't personally have the space to keep that number of birds housed, or inside, abiding by avian influenza restrictions. So I've had to cut down all of my breeding numbers, really, nor do I want to be keeping birds inside. So the number I've produced, certainly, and the number of people around me that have been able to produce because they don't have these birds breeding or producing, has a huge knock-on effect on these gene pools and how many birds we actually have.
Yeah, no, definitely that's something a few people have fed back to myself, in that they've had to reduce their numbers purely because of the practicalities of having to house that many, and then in some cases I've seen it where they might have previously kept multiple breeds. they've sort of gone down more focused of one, because it's again the separation. And obviously, I don't know if that's something the rest of you have seen on the ground from speaking to people as well. So yeah, there is those challenges. And as Ben said, as well as obviously the COVID and avian influenza, the underlying that is the cost. We haven't really mentioned the cost of feed and things like that, but presumably from a practical perspective, when they're being housed and inside, there's the feed element and the cost as well to that, which I know with the other species I've kept as well, the cost of feed certainly hasn't come down in recent years, has it? So I don't see that anytime soon. So there's cost pressures, and I appreciate there's financial pressures externally as well, isn't it? Which all leads to the challenges really that we're discussing.
The problem with the rise in the cost of feed is, of course, that people will then go down the ladder a bit and get something cheaper, which could probably be less nutritious, and so the genetics could easily be harmed in that respect. And you can't blame them for wanting to spend less on feed, but it is very important to keep using as higher quality feed as you can possibly manage in order to keep the birds true to their heritage, true to their standards, and generally their welfare.
Yeah, no, definitely, it's that is critical from that side. Obviously, you briefly mentioned it so at the start, Ben, but in terms of obviously what we directly think about the conservation of these breeds and things, I think we need to be quite clear that we know there is challenges the breeds face in terms of physically numbers. Numbers is obviously the one thing, but then also obviously we talk about the genetic diversity of the breeds. I imagine those breeders that have continued to breed and things, there's challenges of practicalities in terms of the trading of animals, obviously the
Absolutely.
biosecurity risk and
Yeah.
things. So those that have been breeding, it's over that period, though I imagine the genetics have been harder to monitor, haven't they, from that side?
Absolutely, trying to control that. I mean, it's obviously, especially with the heritage breeds and their scarcity now, the genetic sort of bank, so to speak, the dispositions available are narrowing and narrowing. And if you're not able to travel birds from, say, down Wales, England, from Scotland, then you really start to have problems with line breeding. And because these breeds have been struggling for some time, that genetic bank is already weak. And so you start to see quite an effect. So that's another reason why you slow down breeding, especially when when the avian influenza measures are going, because obviously you can't find new genetic material, and if you continue in the wrong vein, you can weaken your flock quite dramatically. So it is very difficult that way. There's no doubt.
And of course, the sales are affected. If you can't get rid of what you've hatched and reared, you're not perhaps going to do as well or as much the next year, which is
Or be
understandable.
able to make the money that you would be if the market and the
To
sales were there to
cover
to pay
feed
for
at
them.
least.
So,
Yeah, exactly. The
Yeah,
idea
it's been a bit of a vicious circle, hasn't it? It's
Yeah.
there is
as soon as it's just that we talk about the cost implications, and then the not having the sales, and as that continues, that sort of encouragement and ability to breed gradually reduces, because like you said, if you can't get rid of the birds and things, you're almost adding to you talk about your numbers problem, aren't you, in terms of the housing
Yes.
and things. It's that sort of vicious circle, and if you then get to a stage where you might be left with your sort of core birds that are perhaps at an age that aren't necessarily at the breeding age, isn't it? It is a bit of a challenge from that side of things. I suppose if we look at sort of how things are starting to look now, and obviously I don't want to be completely negative on the negative side of things, but certainly recently there are starting to be perhaps some positives coming through in terms of the easing of restrictions and things, and ultimately as well sales perhaps on the horizon, shall we say, from that side of things. So there is some positives on there, but what do people sort of think at the moment in terms of how do they see the poultry sector in terms of, I suppose, if we look at the next sort of 6 months, Is there things that people consider are positive steps in the right direction, or further things that perhaps need to be done to help with the conservation of the breeds that we're discussing?
We need the governing bodies to differentiate between the purebred exhibition world and the commercial production of meat and eggs. That's, I mean, if obviously going into the summer it's a more positive time for us because avian influenza outbreaks drop dramatically. But if we face the same onset again come August, June, July, August into September, the later part of the year, and everything gets shut down again, it just seems a vicious loop which can't really escape. And I don't really see how the purebred exhibition world can carry on supporting the numbers without that sort of distinction from the governing bodies.
Yeah. Has anyone got anything further to add?
I think the thing for me is absolutely agree with that, sort of trying to find that sort of differentiation between the commercial and the exhibition side of it. But also as well, with regard to sort of conserving the rare breeds, like you say, Tom, one of the biggest things, and it's an issue that plagues not only rare breed poultry but also large rare breed livestock, is having access and people selling good quality examples of what they're meant to be. Far too often, we see it online on social media in sales and stuff like this, things that are labelled as, let's say, a common misconception, for example, leg bars or light Sussex, when these are merely just that similar coloured hybrids or crossbreds, and that's the real difficulty in it, and that covers all of the species that we're here representing today. Krolwitzer turkeys that have had other breeds bred into them, so they've now got blue and brown on their tails where it should be jet black, and it's something that goes across all livestock species, is trying to get the message out there that it does cost the same amount of money to feed a good one as it does to feed a bad one. So you might as well try your damnedest to keep the best possible examples of the breeds that you've got. Obviously, I understand that there are people that would want hybrid layers and choose those because they want a large amount of eggs. But all I would say to those people is do your research, because you can collect together a good laying flock in your back garden of purebred birds that lay just as many eggs. Because when people say to me, Tom, I'm going to get 6 hybrid layers, and I say to them, well, you'll be sort of getting over 300 eggs a year from each hen. I hope you're looking forward to having eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's one of those things, and you will know from sort of past experiences, it's a big thing of mine for people to actually, breed what it is. And that falls down to education. And if someone buys, or not now, you can't do it, but bought hatching eggs off of eBay and said, exhibition quality light Sussex chickens or leg bars or something like that, that then perpetuates itself and passes it on. So people think that they've got something that's really good when in actual fact it's poor or mediocre at best. So it's just trying to get it out there what actually are good examples of the breeds. And also as well, there are a lot of people now that do breed bad examples, but they have access through sort of social media and other avenues to a lot of people, which is a shame. But you'd like to think if people are keen and that sort of spark of interest is lit with maybe starting with some ex-battery hens, it then progresses on and they go and find and seek out these breeders of pure breeds of various different poultry or waterfowl and carry that on.
Yeah, just on that, in terms of, like you said, that sort of quality control of breeding birds and things. You mentioned obviously education, but do you think there's more that all of us can do to try and spread that message? I know it's difficult because obviously with those gatherings and events are perhaps where people do learn, isn't it? And I know certainly growing up, when I first showed my sheep at agricultural shows, my best learnings and where I picked up all the skills and things was from going to shows, talking to breeders. They'd perhaps give you hints and tips as to why that one perhaps doesn't quite meet the standard in terms of what you should be doing, presenting it and things. And that's where I learnt learned the trade really, sort of by going and talking to these people. Is there particular things that we should be doing to try and educate people on this?
If we could find a way to encourage more people to join the clubs, the breed clubs, and liaise with them, especially through social media. I mean, that seems to be the way forward, is to be able to convince people that being part of the breed club, speaking to other members and getting the advice that is lacking from the actual in-person shows and sales would be much more beneficial. Currently, especially with the Scots Dumpies, well, obviously it's just open again now, but people were really looking just for the hens, not really looking for cockerels. You'd get lots of requests for someone when your 6 best hens, but they're not going to breed them. They're just going to have them in the garden. And so trying to find people who are willing to breed and breed to the standard obviously is exceptionally important. And I think if we could find a way to guide more people to the clubs and their mentorship, I think we'd have a better chance.
I think articles in magazines are very important too. The Country Smallholder, for which I'm writing from a pure breed angle and also veterinary angles as well. And even now there are articles in there with a really good editor just repeating other people's horrible mistakes, and that is just so bad. It just gives a completely wrong attitude to people that they can just take other people's mistakes and then they do the same thing again. So the truth has to come through as much as possible, and so the articles that do appear should be as truthful as people can make them. And I'm now proofreader for the Poultry Club publications because some of that was coming through a bit peculiar.
Thank you.
I think the other thing is as well is it's down to the breed clubs and people within those breed clubs. At times when bird flu restricts gatherings, it's down to them to find ways to keep people engaged and keep members meeting up. The British Waterfowl Association still had members' days and has had throughout all of this, the bird flu sort of lack of gatherings and no shows, which has meant that you're still able to meet up with like-minded people, still able to have a chat and say, oh, how are you getting on with hatching, or how did you get on with that pairing, and all this kind of stuff.
But also, the British Waterfowl Association has an extremely good quarterly newsletter, and it's excellently done, and it's got a very good editor. I happen to be the honorary vet for BWA, and we do question and answer things and all sorts of ways that can try and help people. The other thing that I've been involved with is the Dorking Club, which I've been the secretary now for I think 33 years. And in 1924 we published a book about Dorkings, and it was made by the club members, both novice ones and good breeders, experienced breeders. We did all that by Zoom, even though we weren't allowed to do gatherings at some of the stages. And that was published in 2024, and that has been very, very successful. And it's not just for one breed, because it's got people who have contributed to it who also keep other breeds, and so any backyard person who wants help with breeding can go get a lot of information from something like that. And so it's really good advertising.
That's great. Kai, from your side, obviously talked a little bit about like accessing birds genetics and trying to attract people to it. Obviously with your sort of app sort of hat on from that side, can you explain a bit how that sort of works and how that might be a bit of a solution for some breeders and things to access?
Certainly, and going back to Ben and Tom's point on people buying these eggs and buying hatching eggs and actually carrying on in, breeding something that's useful and something that's true to type and something that's they can go on and sell from and breed from and do, rather than buying from a generic marketplace or website that people can't gain that understanding, can't connect with an organization or where the breed come from. I myself have seen this when I was younger. I thought I was really good breeding all of these different breeds, having all of these different breeds, but actually there's no way of really standardizing input and connection between societies, organizations, new people coming on board and finding varied information. It's such a diverse market that trying to bring it all in on a standard generic platform just doesn't work. So that's what we are really sort of, looking to develop, and working with people like Victoria who've been incredible in giving input and support in trying to ensure this platform is developed in the best way possible that suits these organizations, that ensures the impact future on down the line is actually helpful and positive. And so it's very, very good everyone buying and getting involved, but we really need to have a way of people gaining an understanding, a standard set way of getting involved and reaching a huge audience that are on their phones scrolling and trying to learn, not engaging correctly.
Well, social media does have a little bit to answer for in that respect, because of the people who put into it who don't know what they're talking about, and just want a bit of what is it, 15 minutes of fame?
Exactly. And we've got lots of organizations and clubs. We've recently just had a new launch coming out, so we will be over the next few months starting to work with as many organizations and societies as possible in bringing in information, in engaging these breeds and ensuring there's a platform and space for them to grow and develop and bring in new people.
That's great. It was just in terms of the practicality there, it'd be interesting to know from your side if you've had this. Ben, you mentioned it briefly in terms of people wanting a few hens and not planning to breed, but something I've faced and been approached by individual keepers and people looking at keeping is where they've actually had restrictions in terms of having a cockerel on site and things, the sort of knock-on implications that's had in terms of their actual physical ability to breed, and obviously other species we deal with. Obviously, the solution to not having a breeding male is typically AI, and obviously that's not practical or possible. So it's that's something we find when people come to us, that there is a challenge, and people then ask if there's an opportunity to sort of hire or have a cockerel for a period of time. And obviously we mentioned earlier about the biosecurity challenges and things. And is that something that you've come across quite regularly as well, I take it?
I think just mentioning with people that are just wanting the hens, normally it is the fact that there's a stipulation that they can't keep a cockerel, or there's going to be a problem with a neighbour. Even historically, allotments were quite liberal for chicken keepers, and I believe they still are in many ways. But I think even recently you've seen reports that noise complaints have been forced to eliminate the cockerels from the allotments, and that's again, you're really limiting the number of people that can keep these birds, especially the exhibition and pure breeds, because you tend to keep them in small numbers. So yes, I think allowing people to have more rights to keep something that was traditionally very important should be encouraged.
In my few years of developing and trying to bring in new people and pushing this out there, the amount of questions and people not sure, and people, do I need this? Can I get in? Can I get, can I have these chickens? Do I need to register this? And not actually knowing where to go, what information they have to abide by, where they can learn from, is really tricky for people to understand and know where to go to. And even actual information like how to keep these chickens, a source like Victoria's website on all of these different areas, on actual information that people can learn from, go back to, and really engage with, is sort of a vital thing in ensuring the future of this.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's another area I'm quite keen to look on. We talk about data of specific breeds in terms of physical numbers, but I think it's important as well if we can try and encourage people to look at data in terms of performance as well, so the utility elements of these breeds, and that's something obviously we talk about the sort of comparisons with like commercial birds and things, but the utility element of these breeds is something that we need to promote and record and try and evidence if we can, which I appreciate can sometimes be challenging. Highlighting the uses of these birds, isn't it? Both if we're talking about the meat and egg side of things, is a key part there. Is that something any of you sort of have examples of in terms of the utility side? And
So important, because if you haven't got the utility side of any of the pure breeds, you haven't really got a proper pure breed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether that's eggs or meat or both, it's really important. And the trouble I find the trouble at the moment is that people are terribly sentimental, and they will not eat their own chickens or turkeys because they love them too dearly. well, that's just crackers. And it's very important that in order to keep these breeds and types going, as you do with the larger rare breeds, is breed them and eat them, and then they will survive.
And almost on the welfare side, I think Jamie Oliver looked at getting into supermarkets when you're purchasing chicken, looking at actually showcasing a video where it's come from, factory farm chicken compared to chicken that's free range and organic, and actually showing people and giving that connection. Otherwise, people just look at the cheapest meat, buy it, don't care, and factories are then pumping out productive, money-making breeds that aren't sustainable or right
and
for the
and
farm.
diseases, because it's been proven
Yeah.
again and again that Campylobacter is on the outer covering of commercially bred chickens for meat in supermarkets, on the outer covering.
Yeah.
Not good.
No, I think certainly from the outside, I do get inquiries for people looking for sort of meat type birds and things. But again, it's where they sort of go, isn't it? And that sort of outlet uh, for them, isn't it? I think that's the challenge, and that sort of network that um, does need some improvement on, and something that I want to try and push as well to.
Yeah, farm shops are something that can really help with that, because they've
Yeah.
got all the regulations like the hygiene and all that sort of thing. They've got it there for other species as well. So they should be encouraged to do chicken stuff too, I think.
I think they're starting to, especially in the sort of restaurant, social media, Instagram, and the like, starting to focus more on the older slow grow breeds for flavour, taste, and quality. And although they are more expensive at point of sale, obviously if you're breeding them yourself for that sort of luxury item, it's much more available.
Yes, yeah. The biggest challenge if you try and scale up it is that ability to supply, isn't it? If you start to have bigger conversations with some of the retailers and things, they're talking about thousands of birds, which for some of that's much more than the populations that exist, isn't it?
So high quality stuff has to be waited for, and it's always been like that. Whether it's fashion or cars or whatever, if it's high enough quality, then you just have to wait.
The pricing point would be a problem to have in the supermarkets in comparison to commercial chicken. I mean, you must be talking average £20 a bird for something, you know, a slow grow bird to be presented after about 18, 19 months. That's why backyard keeping is the ideal solution for that, and why we should be more encouraged.
Yeah, and there's opportunities if we look at like other species when people do box schemes for their produce, and I think that's perhaps the market to look at, and again that links into the education side, because obviously if we're trying to encourage people to breed, obviously within that there's going to be some excess animals that perhaps don't meet the grade, or obviously if people are hatching, there's only so many cockerels or males that are perhaps suitable for the breeding program. So that's where it sort of comes round to full circle with the educational element as well, isn't it, from that side of things? So in terms, before we sort of draw it to end, I'm going to ask you to sort of, obviously some of you talked about your specific breeds, but ask you to just a bit of a question about your sort of favorite breed, and understand why you keep them, and things in a second. But before we get onto that, Sarah, has anyone got anything further they'd like to add about some of the topics we've discussed so far this morning?
I suppose I would add that, you know, the purebreds are the foundational breeds for the hybrids, for all the commercial things. They hold all the genetic quality traits and are constantly needed to be put back into them. As Victoria touched on earlier, many of the hybrids aren't actually able to breed or breed true. So without the foundation breeds, without our heritage, we lose them. We lose the ability to create the hybrids. And obviously, for sustainability and how the world actually seems to be going for carbon footprint and stuff, the genetic bank and disease resistance and suitability for our own landscapes are so vital for us to hold on to our heritage breeds.
But we also have to encourage young people to keep taking these breeds on, coming in, gaining this knowledge and understanding it, rather than not having a place to push that knowledge forward, showcase and platform it, and put it out to not just people interested in poultry, but everyone. Poultry chicken's the most consumed meat in the UK. Everyone's consuming eggs and using them for everything, every different purpose. There's so many different ways it can be used and so many different people involved, but it really needs to be shown, impacts clearly represented, and societies and these actual bodies who have this information and who have spent years understanding, learning and gaining experience in helping these young people coming on.
Indeed.
I think the biggest thing as well, especially when we're sort of talking about these rare and native breeds, is actually, and again with any of the species that we keep, is realizing that they're not agricultural antique bits of furniture, that just spot around in the garden or in the stereotypical views of the historic countryside. These are working, living, breathing pieces of our heritage, and we cannot afford to lose any one of them at all. And it's about, like Kai said, it's about making it interesting, making it sexy, making it what people want to be part of, and riding on the crests of those waves of interest that, be it, like Victoria said earlier on, they might come around every 15 minutes with a new person. But the stalwarts of the breeds and of the species and of the sector, we need to just carry on promoting what we do to the high standard that we're doing, and make it as welcoming and as encouraging to new people as possible.
And let's hope that DEFRA listens a bit better than has done in the past, because the Poultry Club has been working very hard, and other associations have been working very hard in trying to get the shows back again, because of the market it produces for people of any age to either start keeping the birds or to continue keeping them. So the whole thing is just based on advertising in as many ways as possible we can possibly think of.
Yeah, it's very much the shows and that marketplace, like we said, events in general. It's the platform where people can see these animals. From Tom's perspective, obviously being a farm park, you obviously have still had that public interest in terms of people coming onto the site and things. I know you do a great deal of education from that side. So there is. Yes, yeah, and it's starting very much at the bottom up, isn't it, in terms of the schools and the education and things. And then ultimately we want to try and make it as accessible as possible. And this is where it's important to showcase what people are doing with them, and obviously the utility element is one part of that, which I think is a critical part, really. And like I said, something we want to push on, promote, and see how we can have that knowledge sharing is critical as well, because we talk about encouraging new people. I think all of us will know with the various poultry breeders and keepers that we have dealt with, that at times there's a bit of an aging population with some poultry keepers as well, isn't it? And it's important that their depth of knowledge is not lost, is it, and is passed on to the future as well.
Getting back to the data just quickly, some of the people who keep certain breeds, particularly the hard-feathered breeds, just don't like people knowing what they've got breed-wise in case they come along and steal them, which is something you can understand, but it's quite a strong piece of the rural people who just do not want government to know what they've got in the way of any breeds, whether that's the larger breeds or the poultry breeds or the waterfowl or anything. So it's quite difficult getting on top of that.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes back to trying to educate in terms of highlighting, to be quite frank, how serious it is for some of these breeds. The numbers, from what we understand, obviously, is we have all the figures, but some of them are in a critical position, aren't they, in terms of these breeds, potentially losing some of these breeds because just numbers, but also obviously the genetics within those breeds as well. So I think trying to reach out to those people, and if they want to sort of support the breed and are serious about the conservation of the future of this breed, then it is having some involvement within the breed clubs themselves to try and to spread those resources they have, because in some cases there are some breeds that I think are a real risk of we're at real risk of losing. As Tom said, they are a critical part to our heritage, but also as well as their heritage, I think they offer a huge amount of possibilities for the future sort of agricultural system as well. We speak to some that are looking at like pastured poultry as well and that type of system. And I think some of our native breeds are ideal for that type of approach if people want to pursue that. So I think we talk about the heritage and the importance, but also I think they play a huge part in the future. As we said, their genetics are represented in the commercial birds that we discuss, aren't they? They are the sort of foundations of those animals, and it is critical that they're maintained from that side of things as well.
And the vast
It's conserving breeds of the past for generations of the future. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's understanding that genetic importance.
and the vast rates of urbanization, meaning actual wildfowl and birds that we breeds that we don't have an impact on are actually decreasing, not having the area, not having the space. So these farmers that are managing these native breeds, managing this land, really need to have that access and that knowledge into knowing why these native breeds, why these rare breeds have lived here for so long, and why they are so useful, and why they are so good at doing what they do.
That's coming. That is increased.
Yeah,
over the last few years a lot, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
But we need to keep pushing it.
Yes, that's great. So, as we sort of finish off, as I said, I'm just going to ask each of you to sort of pick a particular one of your favorite breeds and sort of expand on sort of why you have that breed, sort of what you see as the sort of positives, and ultimately, I'm happy if you want to try and encourage people to perhaps consider your breed as well. But if we start off with you.
Well, I'm an easy guess that Scots Dumpies are
Yes.
obviously my favourite breed. I've been involved with them for over 15 years. I was poultry daft from a very young age, caught for staring at chickens and stuff like that. And I started off with some Dutch Bantams, but when it came to a stage in my life where I was secure and had the time and space to be able to keep poultry full time, I wanted a pure breed. I wanted to be able to support something and do something not just for myself, but help the conservation. And in my searches, obviously, there's only two mainland ones in Scotland for indigenous domestic, and that's the Scots Grey and the Scots Dumpy. And the Scots Dumpy's got little legs, and I like that. I don't know why, but I like that. And once I was sort of managed to track them down, it took me a long time to manage to get a cockerel. It took quite a long time to get some hens, but their nature, their character, they're just ideal. They're just ideal for garden. The short legs makes them not so damaging. They've got a great nature in the sense of they're hardy and they'll survive. And they're great mothers. And to be fair, their eggs, I ruin people's lives by giving them eggs. Never go to a supermarket again. Sometimes you don't actually realize you've tasted an egg until you've had one from a local garden or the backyard. And especially the old slow grow breeds, they just the micronutrients they provide and the colour, it's just a different thing. So their nature, just their nature, they're fiery. They'll protect their chicks from rats and stoats. I've seen a bantam cockerel fight off a stoat. And I've got a lot of time for them.
Mine would be local Brecon buff. So I've had these since I can remember. And of course, being from Brecon, they've been developed, they've evolved in the exact place I'm from. So raising and growing and having Brecon buff, they're used to our conditions, they're used to the climate. So we never have had a problem with them so far. They've been a really, really hardy, fragile breed. They're out grazing through snow, rain, sleet, whatever, they're out and enjoying it. But also the importance of these breeds have actually been developed from where you are. Your local breed has evolved and developed and been made and bred to be useful in that area. There is definitely, a need for that to carry on. And if these breeds disappear, then this land management and all has huge knock-on effects in every area that has. And we're very good friends with the last Welsh vernacular Thatcher in Wales, and he won't use any other reed other than Welsh reed, because what grows in Wales thrives and survives in Wales, and that's the same as breeds that are bred and evolved in these places.
Indeed.
That's great. Thank you. Victoria?
Turkeys are very entertaining. They are completely crackers, and there's only room in their heads for one thought at a time. And trying to change that thought from trying to kill each other into something more useful is quite difficult. But any school children who used to be able to come round and have a look absolutely adore turkeys because children to make a noise and the turkeys respond every single time, and it's wonderful and they like it. And also from the utility point of view, plenty of meat, plenty of eggs, certainly in the spring and summer, and they're just very useful. And the one thing that a lot of people don't know is that the turkey's favorite vegetation is docks, and they will completely clear a field of docks because they love them so much.
There's a conservation grazing opportunity there, I think.
I've just noticed I've got a big patch of docks at home. I might have to get our turkeys out there and see what they can do.
I'll swap you for some brackens.
Sounds a good deal.
And Tom, if you could pick one out of your range of I lost count of how many breeds you actually had, but
I think the thing is I'm probably best known for exhibition Aylesbury ducks, and I've had them for a long time. I was 40 on Good Friday, and I had my first Aylesbury ducks when I was 18, and been keeping the same line since then. I was very lucky with all of the breeds of poultry that I kept to have some very good teachers, but the whole thing for me is I look at the paintings, the old paintings and pictures of people like Vernon Jackson with regard to the Aylesburys, and I always have in my mind's eye those birds. I was incredibly sort of saddened that I never got to meet Vernon Jackson himself, but a number of the trophies that I've won for Best Aylesbury at various shows bear his name. So I'd like to think that the fact that it's been deemed by a judge that my birds are worthy of that accolade means that the birds are some way near the caliber that he would produce. And I mean, why wouldn't you want something as graceful as an Aylesbury? The true exhibition Aylesburys are a complete work of art. You know, the angle of the bill to the head to the neck, the gentle curve from the gentle line from the shoulder down to the tail, and that huge, great big boat-like keel, and that beautiful, bright, flesh-coloured bill is superb. But then I'm very, very passionate about a lot of the breeds I keep, you know, things like the Dorkins and stuff like that, and the Rouen as well. So yeah, but it would be the Aylesburys that I'm best known for. But that's what I would say.
yeah, no, that's great. Thank you all. So yeah, just to finish, I think the key message here is that I'd encourage anyone, but obviously is a keeper of the breeds we've been discussing, or obviously those that want to get involved in keeping these, to obviously contact the respective breed clubs that are there. Obviously they can contact the Rare Breed Survival Trust directly ourselves, and we can obviously direct you in the right direction as well. There's obviously the various websites, information on the respective breeds through our website as well, but both new and existing keepers to engage with the breed clubs and ourselves, so we can work together for the future of these breeds is critical, really. So yeah, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today, and we'll finish it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.